Good morning, and welcome to all those who are joining us by Zoom, by Facebook Live, and to everyone in the room this morning. My name is Gil McGowan, and I have the honor of serving as the elected president of Alberta's largest and oldest worker advocacy group, the Alberta Federation of Labour. I'm joined today by leaders from several of our partner unions. On screen, we have Gavin McGarrigle from Unifor, Scott Lunny from the Steelworkers, Delaney Davio from the Operating Engineers, and Scott Crichton from IBEW. In person, we're joined here in Calgary by Ori Bliss from the Electrical Workers. Collectively, we represent thousands and thousands of Albertans who work in our province's oil and gas sector. We're here today on their behalf and on behalf of all working Albertans. The report we're releasing this morning is not an emission reduction strategy. It's not a climate leadership plan, and it's not a Green New Deal. Instead, this report is a bold and ambitious plan for the Alberta economy, a plan that, if implemented, would preserve existing jobs in the oil and gas sector, create 200,000 new jobs both within the energy sector and beyond it, and set us on a path for continued prosperity in a world that's changing fast. It would also have the effect of reducing our province's emissions, but that would be the byproduct, not the primary goal. Our report is built on the wisdom of two Alberta icons. The first is hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, who famously said that the secret to success in life, as in hockey, is to skate to where the puck is going, not where it has been. When it comes to the energy economy, most Albertans know where the puck is going. Like it or not, it's going towards a future where there will be less demand for fossil fuels. We are not doing Albertans any favors by trying to sugarcoat this fact. The costs of renewables are plummeting, giving fossil fuels a viable competitor for the first time ever. All the big automakers are switching to electric, which has huge implications for future oil demand. Global investors are getting leery about putting their money into projects that may become stranded assets and are instead piling into investments in low-carbon alternatives and infrastructure. At the same time, heat waves, wildfires, and destructive storms are providing constant real-world reminders about the need for action on climate change, and governments are signing ambitious international agreements to accelerate emissions reductions. The global energy transition is real, and it isn't the result of some kind of conspiracy or Trudeau-Notley-Singh alliance. Liberal and New Democrat politicians in Canada are no more responsible for the unfolding energy transition than they are for inflation around the world. What we're witnessing is a global phenomenon which is the result of trends in markets, technology, and politics that are completely outside of our control. No matter what some politicians may try to tell you, we cannot hold back the tide. We can't change these trends by funding war rooms or voting for someone who tells us what we want to hear. All we can do, all we must do, is skate to where the puck is going, not where it has been. Hence the title of our report. That leads me to the second Alberta icon whose wisdom provides a foundation for our report. Former Alberta Premier Peter Lougheed. Back in the 70s, it became clear that Alberta was running out of conventional oil. We needed something else to act as the engine of our economy. That's when Lougheed stepped up to the plate. His solution was to pivot the Alberta economy towards two new industries, petrochemicals and perhaps most importantly, the oil sands. We know now that this strategy turned out to be a huge success. But at the time, corporate investors, including big oil companies, were not interested. The status quo had been too good to them for too long, and they saw no reason to change. Comfort with the status quo is why incumbents rarely lead change, and it's why they often get left behind when it comes. Lougheed understood this. He also understood that no country or region had successfully retooled its economy by simply, quote, letting the market decide. The United States after the Great Depression, Western Europe after the Second World War, Japan and South Korea in the 60s and 70s, even Canada's post-war industrialization. All of these places became economic powerhouses because of public vision, public policy, and public intervention, not in spite of it. Policy wonks call this industrial policy. Renowned economist Mariana Mazzucato calls it the entrepreneurial state. Lougheed called it activist government, and it's the approach he took to create the prosperity that we've enjoyed for decades here in Alberta. To make his vision a reality, Lougheed created a public body to fund technological innovation. He created crown corporations to build infrastructure to support a more diversified energy sector and take the lead on building new projects. He didn't give industry a blank check. Instead, he took majority ownership positions in projects on behalf of Albertans. He initiated the projects and offered opportunities for industry to come along for the ride instead of the other way around. He also reminded Albertans that the province belonged to them, and he urged them to think like owners. Finally, he wasn't afraid to regulate because he understood that what was good for corporations wasn't necessarily always the best for Albertans. For example, he introduced a rule requiring gas companies to strip off natural gas liquids before they could export them to make them available in province for upgrading into petrochemicals. That one decision, a regulation that was opposed by the oil and gas companies, by the way, that decision laid the foundation for the multi-billion-dollar petrochemical industry that we enjoy in Alberta today. By doing all of these things, Lougheed put the future of Alberta in the hands of Albertans instead of leaving it in the hands of others. Today, as we face another arguably bigger set of economic challenges, what we in the Alberta labor movement are saying is that we desperately need to relearn the lessons of Lougheed. Specifically, we need an ambitious Lougheed-style industrial policy that will put us on a new path to prosperity in a changing world. The economic blueprint that we're releasing today does just that. Our plan is built around 7 economic missions and 7 policy mechanisms. The missions describe the most promising pathways for economic development and job creation currently available to our province. I won't go through all 7 this morning, but I will highlight 3. First, we map out a plan for preserving as many jobs as possible in the existing oil and gas sector by lowering emissions and mitigating the industry's environmental liabilities like abandoned wells and oil sands tailing ponds. Second, we suggest pivoting the oil and gas sector from providing feedstock for fuels to providing feedstock for materials manufacturing. Existing jobs could be maintained in extraction, and new jobs would be created in manufacturing things like carbon fiber. Third, we look at the move towards greater electrification for what it really is, an unprecedented infrastructure opportunity. Experts say that we need to double or triple the size of our grid. That means billions in economic activity, it means thousands and thousands of jobs, and it also means being able to use access to cheap, clean power as a way to attract new businesses to our province. When you put these plans together with other plans outlined in the report, for things like hydrogen, critical minerals refining, building retrofits, public transit, and the creation of cross-province economic corridors. When you put all these things together, we have an economic blueprint that could lead to economic development and job creation on the scale of what we saw during the height of the oil sands boom, perhaps something even bigger. From an economic perspective, we simply cannot afford to not seize these opportunities. At this point, some of you may be thinking, we've heard this before. And it's true that business groups right here in Calgary, like the Calgary Economic Development Organization, the Business Council of Alberta, they've both recently released reports saying similar things to what we're saying today. We think that's notable. To have Alberta workers and large swaths of the Alberta business community singing from similar song sheets suggests that we're really onto something. And it demonstrates that this is not something that is being imported from outside the province or being imposed by Ottawa. It's Albertans coming up with Alberta solutions. The thing that distinguishes our plan from the others is the scale and scope of our ambition. And the fact that we're suggesting that government, on behalf of the citizens of our province, needs to take the lead. As Lougheed said, we need to think like owners. That means that if we're going to put money on the table, public money, to make these things happen, then we should demand equity shares. We should be also unafraid to attach strings requiring that the jobs created are actually good jobs. I want to wrap up this morning by making 3 final points. First, the need for the kind of industrial policy that we're proposing today was made even more urgent by the passage this summer by the U.S. Congress of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA for short. Make no mistake, the IRA is an industrial policy blueprint designed to pivot the American economy in very similar ways to what we're proposing in our report. Electrification, hydrogen, critical minerals, transit, building retrofits, manufacturing to support electrical vehicles, it's all there. The Americans are our biggest trading partner, and our economies are deeply integrated. We can pivot with them and reap the benefits, or we can refuse to follow their lead and be left out and left behind. Given the high stakes and the accelerating pace of change, we in the labor movement believe that it should be seen as disqualifying for any party in our upcoming provincial election if they don't have a clear plan to dovetail with the IRA and guide our economy through the unfolding global energy transition. We really need someone to seize the mantle of Lougheed. That's what the next election should really be about. Second, I want to make an appeal from the heart on behalf of all Alberta workers. Oil and gas has made Alberta the engine of the Canadian economy. It has also brought unprecedented prosperity and security to our province. The oil sands in particular has been our golden goose. It's one of the biggest and most impressive industrial and technological achievements, not just in Canadian history, but in the history of the world. And Alberta workers built it. Electricians, pipe fitters, boiler makers, iron workers, carpenters, scaffolders, truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, you name it. Governments and corporations may have provided the capital, but Alberta workers provided the labor. None of what has been built, none of what has been accomplished would have been possible without the strength and skill, the determination and the work ethic of Alberta workers. And we are proud of that fact. But we know that change is coming. So what we're asking for, actually what we're demanding, is a plan. There's a profound economic paradigm shift bearing down on us like a freight train. Telling us what you think we want to hear won't cut it. Telling us everything will be fine won't cut it. And offering vague promises about a so-called just transition won't cut it. Give us a plan, give us projects, put your money where your mouth is, and let us do the rest. We'll build it, just like we built the oil sands, with pride and with purpose. That brings me to my final point for this morning. Why should anyone listen to a bunch of workers when it comes to the future of the economy? We are acutely aware that business people, economists, and maybe a few politicians and bureaucrats, they're the ones who are seen as the only credible voices on the economy. But we're here to say today that workers deserve a say on the economy too. Why? Because workers are the economy. Because without our work, without our consumption, there would be no economy. Because the pandemic has reminded us of our worth. Because we have brains, not just strong backs. Because we work on the front lines and know things that bosses don't. Because our ideas are often demonstrably better than the increasingly crazy stuff we're hearing from our so-called leaders. And perhaps most importantly, Alberta workers deserve a say on the economy because we're the ones who have to live with the consequences. If, as a province, we do nothing to prepare for the change that's coming, and our economy crashes as a result, CEOs and well-connected politicians, they'll be fine. They'll just jet off to some other location. But workers will be left here trying to pick up the pieces for themselves, for their families, and their communities. Working Albertans arguably have more at stake than anyone. So please, listen to what we have to say on these important economic issues. The future of our province may depend on it. Thank you. So at this point, I would be happy to answer some questions if anyone in the media has them. I will point out that we have a press package at the back of the room. It's also available online. It includes the news release for today, an executive summary of our report. We also have a nifty business card that has a QR code that takes you directly to an electronic copy of the 90-page report. And if you're here in person, there's also a joint letter that our unions have sent to the Prime Minister outlining what we'd like to see from the federal government. That's been reported on already, so we thought we'd just throw it in the package. Honestly, originally it was supposed to be just a private letter to the Prime Minister on our behalf, but it's out there in the public now, so if you want it, it's in the press package. I would be happy to answer questions if there are any, but as I said at the outset, we're joined by representatives from a number of our partner unions, and they would also be willing to answer questions if we have them either from the floor or from the Facebook or Zoom feeds. So once again, we've got Gavin McGarrigle from Unifor, Scott Lunny from Steel, the United Steelworkers Union, Delaney Davio from the Operating Engineers, which, by the way, most people don't know, that's one of the biggest construction unions in the province. We also have 2 representatives from the electrical workers. So questions if you have them.
The plan talks about doubling or tripling the electrical grid by 2050. Is that a realistic plan? Look at what's in there right now. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had to switch to, or they put 2 warnings out about electrical consumption. What kind of investment needs to be made to actually get to that doubling or tripling of the capacity for the electrical grid? And they talked about it as well as to types of jobs that would create.
Yeah. So the question from the floor has to do with the electric grid. In our report, we suggest that the capacity of the grid needs to at least double, perhaps triple, and we're suggesting that maybe we make it even bigger than that to accommodate the increasing demand that will come as the economy becomes more electrified. And the reporter, I think from the Herald, wants to ask whether or not that's reasonable in the time frame we're suggesting. I'll be honest, nothing that we're suggesting in this report, whether it is the expansion of the electrical grid or the creation of new industries like carbon fiber, none of the things that we're suggesting will happen without massive investment from both the public and the private sector and without a clear industrial plan led by government. So is it realistic in the current context? Probably not, and that's our point. If we leave things to the existing business community, if we satisfy ourselves with leaving it to, letting the market decide, we know that we will not hit our marks. We will not live up to the potential that's there if we do what we're proposing in this plan, which is to embrace this idea of industrial policy, look to the lessons of Peter Lougheed from the 70s and the 80s, and purposefully pivot our economy. None of this is going to happen unless we change our mindset. Because like right now, for the last 40 years or so, governments in Canada and indeed around the world have embraced a different approach to economic development, one which has been variously described as neoliberalism or trickle-down economics. It's an approach that sees a very small role for government, and basically, waits for the market to make decisions. In our report, based on historical precedent, we argue that that approach has been an unmitigated failure, and it's not well suited for the challenges that we're facing today. Because what we need to do is retool the global economy, which is happening with the unfolding energy transition, and here in Alberta, we have to retool the Alberta economy in very short order. That's not going to happen unless there's direction from the top, unless there's a plan, unless we put our money where our mouth is. And so whether it's the double or tripling of the electrical grid, or building out new industries, creating a hydrogen economy, all these opportunities exist, but without that fundamental first step of embracing industrial policy, Lougheed-style industrial policy, we will miss those opportunities.
Hi, Gil. Scott Payne from UFCW Local 401. So less than a week ago, the UCP narrowly elected a new leader who is taking on premiership of the province. And in her initial remarks, she indicated that she was going to be following a course of action around doubling down around corporate subsidies and investing in the oil and gas sector is sort of her idea about the economic future of the province. And as you indicated in your remarks, it's it's a course of action we've seen not be successful over the last couple of years. I'm wondering, what's your response? Is that something that you're concerned about? How would you respond to that new premier? What are we looking for from this new leader?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. And frankly, I'm very worried. I'm worried that Premier Smith is going to miss the opportunities that are in front of us. I'm worried that Premier Smith is going to fall back on failed economic strategies instead of learning the lessons of Lougheed. And very specifically, in the next few months, I'm worried that Premier Smith is going to trash the TIER program, which is one of the most important tools for pivoting our industry in this province, by treating it like a get-out-of-jail-free card for her government. Then it won't just be Danny the destroyer of healthcare, education, and public health. It'll be Danny the destroyer of jobs and the economy too. As we say in our report, we desperately need a government and a premier who's willing to seize the mantle of Lougheed. I'm afraid that based on the positions she has previously taken and which she has been doubling down over the past few days, she is the last person who will do that, and we'll all pay the price. Okay, so I think there's no more questions from the floor. In conclusion, I just want to say this. Today, we've offered a roadmap for adaptation, for us thriving and prospering in a changing world. It's based on our existing strengths and on successful historical precedents, and is supported by both Alberta workers and large swaths of the Alberta business community. We should seize this moment, we should embrace this plan, and we should move ahead together. As citizens of a major oil and gas producing jurisdiction, we need to accept that our future will not be the same as our past. We have to pivot and adapt, because if we don't, we run the risk of being left behind. But that does not have to be our fate. By skating to where the puck is going instead of where it has been, and by embracing the lessons of activist government pioneered by former Premier Peter Lougheed, we can make sure that our future will be just as bright and prosperous as our past. So thanks very much for joining us today, and I'd encourage you all to read a copy of the report. It's available online at the Alberta Federation of Labour website, www.afl.org. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.